I smoothed my dress for the 100th time, watching the city lights blur past our car window. 10 years of marriage, and tonight was supposed to be perfect. I'm Lana, and in exactly 47 minutes, my entire world would shatter into a million pieces. You seem nervous, Matthew said, his hand resting on my knee. The same hand that had held mine through countless moments, good and bad. The same hand that I would soon learn had been slowly strangling everything I held dear. Just excited, I replied, forcing a smile. It's not every day we celebrate our 10th anniversary. The restaurant was exactly what you'd expect for such a milestone. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and the soft murmur of expensive conversations. Matthew's family had already arrived, occupying the private room he'd reserved. His sister Susan rushed to embrace me, her perfume overwhelming. "The golden couple!" she exclaimed, pulling back to examine my face. "Lana, you look absolutely radiant." I noticed Emily, my 16-year-old daughter, sitting quietly in the corner. She seemed unusually tense, her fingers fidgeting with her napkin. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. "Something wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, moving toward her. Before she could answer, Matthew clinked his glass, commanding everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, his voice carrying that familiar authority that had first attracted me to him. The room fell silent. 10 years ago, I married this beautiful woman, he began, gesturing toward me, and tonight, I think it's time for some honesty. My stomach dropped. There was something in his tone, something cruel I'd never heard before. "Lana," he continued, "you've been a wonderful wife, but as they say, all good things must come to an end." The room grew impossibly quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "I'm filing for divorce," he declared, his lips curving into what I can only describe as a smirk. "And I have an announcement that might explain why." He walked over to Emily, placing his hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but didn't move away. "Emily and I have fallen in love." The words hit me like a physical blow. Several gasps echoed around the room, followed by murmurs of shock. But then, to my horror, I watched as his family's expressions transformed from surprise to acceptance, even approval. Susan actually smiled, raising her glass. "To new beginnings." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The tension in her shoulders, the fear in her eyes. This wasn't love. This was predation. "Emily," I said softly, "come here, baby." She practically leaped from her chair, crossing the room to stand beside me. Her hand found mine, squeezing it tight. Matthew's smile faltered slightly. "Now, Lana, don't make this difficult. Emily and I—" "Stop talking." My voice was ice. "My 16-year-old daughter? Really, Matthew?" He straightened his tie, regaining his composure. "She's very mature for her age, and these things, well, they just happen." His family nodded in agreement, like this was all perfectly normal, like my husband hadn't just announced his intentions toward my child. I felt Emily trembling beside me, and something inside me solidified. 10 years of suspicious business trips, of mysterious phone calls, of documents hastily hidden when I entered rooms, it all clicked into place. "Well," I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning through my veins, "I suppose I should thank you for making this so public." Confusion flickered across his face. I smiled, the kind of smile that promises war. "See you in court, Matthew." His smug expression wavered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I replied, gathering my purse and wrapping an arm around Emily, "that you really should have checked what your stepdaughter was doing when she was helping in your home office all these years." The color drained from his face as Emily and I walked toward the door. Behind us, I heard Susan's sharp intake of breath and Matthew's chair scraping against the floor. "Lana, wait." But we were already gone, stepping into the cool night air. Emily's hand was still in mine, steady now. "Mom," she whispered, "I have everything. Everything he did, everything he said. All of it." I pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I know, baby, I know." I'd raised a smart girl after all. While Matthew had been plotting his sick little game, we'd been building a case that would destroy him. As we climbed into a taxi, I caught a glimpse of Matthew through the restaurant window, his face contorted with rage. He thought he had all the power, but he'd forgotten one crucial thing: never underestimate a mother protecting her child. The game was just beginning, and I intended to win. The morning after the anniversary disaster, I sat across from Royal Ramirez in his corner office, watching him flip through the files Emily and I had compiled over the past year. This is... He paused, adjusting his glasses. Remarkable, Lana. How long have you suspected? The embezzlement? About 2 years, I replied, reaching for my coffee. But I needed proof. That's where Emily came in. Royal spread several documents across his desk. Bank statements, emails, and photographs created a paper trail of Matthew's corruption. And your daughter gathered all this? He never saw her as a threat, I said, bitter smile playing on my lips. Just his young, naive stepdaughter who loved helping in his office, the perfect cover. A knock at the door interrupted us. Emily entered, clutching her laptop. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. I found more, she announced, setting the computer down. Remember those weekend trips he took to the Cayman Islands? Royal leaned forward. Show me. Emily pulled up a series of encrypted emails. He's been moving money through shell companies, lots of it, and look who helps manage the accounts. Susan, I breathed, recognizing the name on the documents. His own sister. There's something else, Emily said, her voice shaking slightly. She pulled out her phone and played an audio recording. Matthew's voice filled the room. Once the divorce is final, we'll transfer everything offshore. Lana won't see a penny. And Emily, sweetheart, we can finally be together. My stomach churned at his sickening tone. Emily's hand trembled as she stopped the recording. He started suggesting things about 6 months ago, she explained, not meeting my eyes. I played along, pretending to be flattered. It made him careless. He'd leave his office unlocked, his computer logged in. I reached across the desk and grabbed her hand. I'm so sorry you had to do that, baby. Don't be, she said firmly. He deserves everything that's coming to him. Royal cleared his throat. This is excellent work, but we need more. Specifically about the offshore accounts. Do you have any contacts inside his company? Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I might know someone. Jarrett Cox. Matthew fired him last year when he started asking too many questions about the company's finances. I dialed Jarrett's number, putting him on speaker. Lana? His voice crackled through. I heard about what happened at the restaurant. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, Jarrett. I'm with my lawyer and we need your help. Remember those irregularities you found in the Asian market investments? You mean the ones that got me fired? Yeah, I kept copies of everything. Matthew thought he'd destroyed all the evidence, but I'm not an idiot. Royal interjected, Mr. Cox, would you be willing to testify? Against Matthew? In a heartbeat. That bastard destroyed my career. I'll bring you everything I have tomorrow morning. After ending the call, Royal sat back, a satisfied look on his face. With Jarrett's evidence added to what you already have, we can nail him on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and... He glanced at Emily. Other charges. My phone buzzed. A text from Susan. We need to talk. Coffee, just us girls. I showed it to Royal, who nodded slowly. Meter, wear this. He pulled a small recording device from his desk drawer. We need to know what she knows. As Emily and I left Royal's office, she suddenly stopped in the hallway. Mom, what if it's not enough? What if he still wins? I turned to face her, seeing not just my brave daughter who'd helped gather evidence, but also the scared girl who'd been manipulated by a predator. Listen to me, I said, holding her shoulders. Matthew thinks he's untouchable because he's always gotten away with everything. But he made 2 fatal mistakes. He underestimated you, and he forgot that I've been watching him for years. We have the evidence, we have the witnesses, and most importantly, we have the truth. She nodded, straightening her spine. When are you meeting Susan? In an hour, I replied, checking my phone. At that pretentious cafe she loves. Be careful, Emily warned. She's almost as bad as he is. I hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Don't worry, Susan thinks she's coming to negotiate. She doesn't realize she's walking into a trap. As we headed to the elevator, I felt a surge of determination. Matthew had spent years building his house of cards, thinking himself invincible. Now, piece by piece, we would watch it fall, and I would make sure he felt every single moment of it. The cafe was busy when I arrived, But I spotted Susan immediately, perched at a corner table like a vulture waiting for its prey. The recording device felt heavy against my ribs. "Lana, darling," she cooed, rising to air kiss my cheek. "I took the liberty of ordering your usual vanilla latte." "How thoughtful," I replied, sliding into my seat, though I switched to black coffee months ago, less sugar. Her perfectly painted smile flickered. "Of course, my mistake. Like the mistake of helping your brother hide millions in offshore accounts?" The coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Grand Cayman Bank, account number 84793. I started reciting, watching her face pale. Should I continue? She set her cup down carefully, manicured nails clicking against the porcelain. "What do you want?" "The truth would be nice, starting with how long you've known about Matthew's plans for my daughter." Susan leaned forward, dropping her voice. "Listen, Lana, Emily is practically a woman now. These things happen. If you fight this, you'll lose everything. Matthew has connections." "Like Judge Harrison," I interrupted. "The one he's been bribing?" Another crack in her composure. "These are dangerous accusations." "No, Susan, these are facts. Facts I can prove." The door chimed and Jarrett walked in, right on schedule. He nodded at me before taking a seat at the adjacent table, close enough to hear everything. Susan's eyes darted between us. "Who is that?" "Just another piece of the puzzle you and Matthew didn't clean up properly." Her voice turned sharp. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm giving you a chance," I corrected. "One chance to do the right thing before everything comes crashing down." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You really think you can take on Matthew? He'll destroy you." "Like he destroyed Jarrett?" I gestured to the next table. "Tell her what happened, Jarrett." He turned in his chair. "Hello, Susan. Remember me? The accountant your brother fired for finding his money laundering scheme?" The color drained from her face. "That was a misunderstanding." "The SEC doesn't think so," Jarrett cut in. "They were very interested in the documents I saved." Susan's hand shook as she reached for her purse. "This conversation is over." "One more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "Emily wanted me to play something for you." I hit play on one of the recordings. Matthew's voice filled our corner of the cafe. "Susan's handling the transfers. Once you're 18, Emily, we'll have everything set up. A new life. Just us." "Stop," Susan whispered, looking sick. "Just stop." That's what Emily wanted to say, too. Multiple times. But your brother wouldn't listen. She stood abruptly, knocking her coffee over. "You don't understand. He'll come after all of us." "No, Susan, we're coming after him. The only question is, which side of the courtroom do you want to be on?" As she hurried out, Jarrett moved to my table. "Think she'll flip?" "She's scared," I said, watching her through the window as she practically ran to her car. And scared people make mistakes. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Mom, come home now. Found something huge in his private email." "I have to go," I told Jarrett. "Meet us at Royal's office tomorrow morning?" He nodded. "I'll bring everything I have. And Lana, be careful. Matthew's not going to take this lying down." I drove home quickly, finding Emily at the dining room table, her laptop open and her face pale. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward me. The email was dated 3 months ago, sent to a private account in Switzerland. My heart stopped as I read the contents. Details of a plan so elaborate, so cruel. It took my breath away. "He was never going to let us go," Emily whispered. "He was going to—" "I know, baby." I pulled her close, my mind racing. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. My phone rang, Royal's number flashing on the screen. "Lana," he said without preamble, "we need to move fast. Matthew just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." "He's going to try to liquidate everything," I realized. "Exactly. Whatever you and Emily found, bring it now. We're filing for an emergency injunction tonight." I looked at my daughter, saw the determination in her eyes matching my own. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. As we gathered our evidence, I couldn't help but think about Susan's warning. Matthew would come after us with everything he had. But what he didn't know was that we were ready. More than ready. The war was about to begin, and we had just found our nuclear option. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Matthew strutted in, flanked by 3 expensive lawyers. His confident smirk faltered when he saw Jarrett sitting behind our table, manila folders stacked neatly in front of him. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Martinez entered. Not Judge Harrison, as Matthew had expected. His legal team exchanged worried glances. "Your Honor," Royal began, standing, "we're here seeking an emergency injunction against Mr. Elliott's attempts to liquidate company assets, and we have evidence of extensive financial fraud." Matthew's lead lawyer jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. These are baseless accusations from a vindictive soon-to-be ex-wife." Baseless? Royal raised an eyebrow. "Let's start with Exhibit A." He projected the first document onto the courtroom screen, a series of wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. Matthew's face tightened. "These transfers," Royal continued, "total over $12 million in the past 18 months alone, money that mysteriously disappeared from company accounts. Business investments," Matthew's lawyer argued, "completely legitimate." "Really?" Royal clicked to the next slide. "Then perhaps you can explain why they were routed through shell companies owned by Mr. Elliott's sister." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I noticed Susan, sitting in the back, shift uncomfortably in her seat. "Furthermore," Royal pressed on, "we have testimony from a former employee regarding these transactions." Jarrett stood, walking to the witness stand. As he was sworn in, I saw Matthew's knuckles turn white as he gripped the table. "Mr. Cox," Royal began, "please tell the court about what you discovered last year." "I was the senior accountant," Jarrett testified. "I found discrepancies in the Asian market accounts, large sums being diverted through a series of shell companies. When I brought this to Mr. Elliott's attention, he fired me and threatened to destroy my career if I spoke up." Matthew leaned forward, whispering furiously to his lawyers. One of them stood. "Your Honor, this is clearly a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge." "I have the original documents," Jarrett interrupted, "with Mr. Elliott's signature authorizing each illegal transfer, and emails discussing how to hide them from the board and shareholders." The judge leaned forward. "I'd like to see those documents." As the evidence was presented, I watched Matthew's composure crack. His eyes darted around the room, finally landing on Emily in the gallery. The predatory look that crossed his face made my blood boil. "Your Honor," Royal said, "we have one more witness, Emily." Matthew's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, she's a minor." "A minor," Royal countered, "who Mr. Elliott has claimed he intends to marry. I believe her testimony is highly relevant." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Emily walked to the stand, her head high. She looked directly at Matthew as she was sworn in. "Emily," Royal began gently, "can you tell us about the documents you found in Mr. Elliott's home office?" "Objection," Matthew's lawyer shouted. "Any documents obtained without consent were in plain sight," Emily cut in. "On the computer I was explicitly given access to for homework help." The judge overruled the objection. Emily pulled out her phone. "I also recorded conversations," she continued, "like this one from last month." Matthew's voice filled the courtroom. "Once we get rid of your mother, we'll have everything. The money's already moved. She'll never find it." The recording continued, becoming increasingly inappropriate. Several jurors looked disgusted. Susan quietly stood and slipped out of the courtroom. "Your Honor," Royal said, "we have extensive evidence of financial crimes, attempted fraud, and inappropriate conduct with a minor. We ask that all company assets be frozen immediately." The judge studied Matthew, who was now visibly sweating. "Mr. Elliott, would you like to address these allegations?" Matthew stood, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, this is all a misunderstanding. I can explain—" "Save it for the criminal trial," the judge cut in. "I'm granting the emergency injunction. All assets are frozen pending full investigation. And Mr. Elliott," she added, her voice steel, "I'm issuing a restraining order. You are to have no contact with Emily or her mother." As the gavel fell, Matthew lunged toward our table. "You lying little—" Two court officers grabbed him before he could finish. Emily didn't flinch, staring him down as he was pulled away. Outside the courtroom, Royal smiled. "This is just the beginning. The criminal charges will be filed tomorrow." I hugged Emily close, watching Matthew being led away in handcuffs, his perfect world crumbling around him. But something in his eyes, a dangerous glint of desperation, told me this wasn't over. "He still has something planned," Emily whispered, seeing it too. "Let him try," I replied. "We're ready." The criminal trial began 3 weeks later. I sat in the front row, watching Matthew's mask of confidence slip further with each new piece of evidence. His expensive suit couldn't hide the toll of jail time. He'd lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. The prosecution calls Susan May to the stand, the district attorney announced. Matthew's head snapped up as his sister walked to the witness box. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Ms. May, the DA began, please tell the court about the offshore accounts you managed for your brother. Susan gripped the stand, her voice shaking. I helped Matthew move money through various shell companies. It started small, but over time... Objection, Matthew's lawyer interrupted. This witness was not offered immunity. Actually, the DA countered, Ms. May has entered into a cooperation agreement with the state. Matthew slammed his fist on the table. You treacherous bitch. Order. The judge's gavel cracked. Mr. Elliott, control yourself or you'll be removed. Susan continued, detailing years of financial manipulation. She described elaborate schemes to hide money, fake investments, and forge documents. With each revelation, Matthew's face grew darker. And what did your brother tell you about his plans regarding his stepdaughter? Susan dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. He said he'd been grooming her for months, that once she turned 18, they would disappear with the money. He laughed about it. The jury's disgust was palpable. One woman actually glared at Matthew, who was now whispering frantically to his lawyer. Next, the prosecution played Emily's videos. The courtroom watched in silence as Matthew appeared on screen, making inappropriate advances, discussing their future together, all while Emily pretended to be flattered while secretly recording everything. Your Honor, Matthew's lawyer stood. These videos were obtained without my client's consent. In a single-party consent state, the DA interrupted. Perfectly legal, as you well know. During a brief recess, Royal pulled me aside. Something's wrong. Matthew's too calm. What do you mean? He's got an ace up his sleeve. Watch Susan, she keeps checking her phone. Back in session, Matthew's defense began their case. His lawyer called a surprise witness, James Turner, the company's IT director. Mr. Turner, the lawyer began, what did you find when examining Ms. Emily's computer? Objection, Royal shot up. This witness wasn't on the list. Late discovery, Your Honor. Critical evidence came to light this morning. The judge allowed it. My stomach tightened as Turner testified. I found evidence of hacking, he claimed. Someone used that computer to illegally access company servers, plant false documents, and manipulate financial records. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Emily grabbed my hand, her face pale. He's lying, she whispered. I never... Royal stood. Your Honor, may I cross-examine? Proceed. Mr. Turner, when did you perform this analysis? This morning. And who ordered it? Ms. May. Royal smiled. The same Ms. May who just testified about her role in the fraud? The same Ms. May who's been sending text messages throughout these proceedings? Turner shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, Royal continued, I'd like to enter into evidence these messages, obtained through Ms. May's cooperation agreement. He projected a series of texts onto the screen. Messages between Susan and Turner, planning this false testimony. Messages with Matthew, orchestrating one final attempt to discredit Emily. Furthermore, Royal added, we have Mr. Turner's banking records showing a $100,000 deposit made this morning from one of the known shell companies. Turner's face crumpled. Matthew leaped up, pointing at Susan. You promised you deleted those messages. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Bailiff, remove Mr. Elliott. As Matthew was dragged out shouting, Turner broke down on the stand. He made me do it, he sobbed. He said he'd ruin me if I didn't testify. The DA stood. Your Honor, the state moves to add witness tampering and obstruction of justice to the charges. By day's end, Turner had joined Susan in making a deal with prosecutors. Matthew's last desperate play had backfired spectacularly. Outside the courthouse, Royal looked satisfied. That's the last card he had to play. Tomorrow we present the final evidence. Emily hugged me tight. Is it really almost over? Almost, I promised, watching Susan hurry to her car. She looked haunted, destroyed by her own brother's manipulation. That night, as Emily and I sat in our secured apartment, Royal's insistence after the death threats started, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won? Watch the morning news. Some things can't be undone. I showed it to Emily, who immediately called Royal. Don't worry, he said after I read him the message. The police are monitoring everything. He's just trying to scare you. But as I looked at my daughter's worried face, I couldn't shake the feeling that Matthew had one final devastating move planned. The morning news hit like a bomb. I watched in horror as the anchor reported, "Breaking news. Massive data breach at Elliott Corp. Reveals thousands of compromised customer accounts. Sources say sensitive information was leaked by an inside source." My phone exploded with messages. Royals came first. "Turn on your TV, now." Emily burst into my room, laptop in hand. "Mom, they're trying to pin this on me. Look." She showed me social media posts already spreading like wildfire, claiming she had orchestrated the breach using her access to Matthew's computers. His supporters were calling for her arrest. "Get dressed," I ordered. "We're meeting Royal." As we rushed to the car, Jarrett called. "Lana, I know what Matthew did. The breach came from an external server in Russia, but he's manipulated the logs to point to Emily's laptop." "Can you prove it?" "Already working on it. But there's more. He's emptied the corporate pension fund. Thousands of employees just lost everything." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "He's burning it all down." Royal's office was chaos when we arrived. Phones ringing nonstop, reporters camping in the lobby. He ushered us into a private conference room where Susan waited, looking terrified. "He's gone completely insane," she blurted out. "He called me last night, laughing about his scorched earth plan. Said if he's going down, he's taking everyone with him." "Where is he now?" Royal demanded. "Under house arrest at his penthouse," she replied. "But he's got people helping him, loyal employees who still believe in him." Emily opened her laptop. "Look what I found in his cloud backup." She played a video of Matthew, recorded recently in his penthouse. He stared into the camera, smirking. "By now you've seen the news," he said. "Poor Emily, such a troubled girl, hacking her stepfather's company. But that's just the beginning. Every hour more data will leak, more accounts compromised, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." "Actually," Jarrett said from the doorway, making us jump, "there is." He walked in, holding up a flash drive. "Remember that IT director who lied on the stand? He gave me access to the backup servers. I've got proof the breach came from Russia and—" He smiled grimly, evidence that Matthew ordered it himself. Royal grabbed his phone. "I'm calling the DA. We need to move fast." Suddenly, Emily gasped. "The offshore accounts, they're being drained right now. Look." Her screen showed real-time transfers emptying the hidden accounts we'd frozen, millions disappearing by the second. "That's impossible," Susan whispered. "Those accounts were locked." "Unless someone with authorization unfroze them," I realized, staring at her. "Someone like you." She backed away, reaching for her purse. "I had no choice. He threatened my children." Royal blocked the door. "Susan, don't make this worse." "You don't understand," she sobbed. "He's got everything planned. The data breach, the pension fund, the accounts. It's all a distraction. His real target is—" She looked at Emily, horror in her eyes. My blood ran cold. What did he plan for Emily? Before she could answer, Jarrett's laptop pinged. "Someone's accessing the company's private jet records. A flight plan was just filed for tonight. Destination? Dubai." "No extradition," Royal muttered. My phone buzzed. A text from Matthew. Should have kept her away from computers. Too late now. Emily's laptop suddenly went black, then displayed a message. "Access granted. Download complete." "He's in my computer," she cried. "Everything's being wiped." Jarrett jumped into action, fingers flying over his keyboard. He's not just wiping it, he's planting evidence, making it look like Emily orchestrated everything. "Call the police," Royal ordered, already dialing. "We need officers at his penthouse now." But Susan was shaking her head. "He's not there. The house arrest ankle monitor? He switched it hours ago. He's already gone." My phone buzzed again. "Coming for what's mine. Say goodbye to Emily." The room erupted into action. Royal calling in favors, Jarrett tracing digital footprints, Susan finally breaking down and revealing more of the plan. But all I could focus on was Emily, my brave, brilliant daughter who had risked everything to expose this monster. Now he was trying to destroy her completely. "Mom," she said quietly, taking my hand. "I'm scared." "Listen to me," I replied, steel in my voice. "He thinks he's won. thinks he's destroyed everything, but he forgot the most important thing. What's that? I pulled out my own flash drive, the one I'd never told anyone about. I keep copies of everything, and I mean everything. For the first time that morning, Royal smiled. The hunter becomes the hunted. Exactly, I said, plugging in the drive. Time to end this, once and for all. Got him, Jarrett shouted, his laptop screen lighting up with coordinates. He's at the private airfield outside the city. Royal was already on the phone with the DA. We need that arrest warrant now. He's attempting to flee the country. I grabbed Emily's hand. Stay here with Jarrett. Susan, you're coming with me. What? No, I can't. You can and you will. I cut her off. Your brother needs to see your face when it all falls apart. Police sirens wailed as we raced to the airfield, Susan trembling in the passenger seat. 3 patrol cars flanked us, lights flashing. My phone was on speaker, connected to Jarrett and Emily. The jet's fueled and ready, Jarrett reported. But I've locked down the flight controls remotely. He's not going anywhere. We screeched to a halt at the airfield gates. Through the chain-link fence, I could see Matthew's private jet, its engines humming. A familiar figure was climbing the stairs. He's boarding, Susan cried. No, I smiled. He's trapped. The police burst through the gates, cars surrounding the jet. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. Matthew Elliott, a voice boomed over a megaphone. We have a warrant for your arrest. Exit the aircraft with your hands up. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the jet's door opened, and Matthew appeared, still wearing his expensive suit, but now disheveled and wild-eyed. You're too late, he shouted. The money's gone, all of it, and Emily's reputation is destroyed. I stepped forward, holding up my flash drive. You mean this money? His face contorted. What? While you were busy planning your grand escape, I was tracking every transfer, every account, every fake transaction. It's all here, and it's already been sent to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. You're bluffing, he snarled, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Tell him, Susan. His sister stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. The offshore accounts? I never actually unfroze them. Those transfers you saw? All fake. We were tracking where you tried to send the money. Matthew's face went from red to white. You betrayed me? No, brother. You betrayed yourself. My phone crackled. Mom, Emily's voice rang out. We've recovered everything from my laptop. Jarrett found proof the Russian hackers were hired directly by Matthew. We have the payment records. Matthew lunged down the stairs, but police officers tackled him before he could reach us. As they handcuffed him, he thrashed and screamed. You think this is over? I still have friends, powerful friends. Actually, Royal said, walking up with his phone out, you don't. The board of directors just voted unanimously to remove you and cooperate fully with authorities. They're quite interested in keeping themselves out of prison. The pension fund, Matthew started. Already recovered, I interrupted. You really should have changed your private banking passwords, dear. 10 years of marriage and you still used our anniversary date. His face crumpled as reality set in. Everything he'd built, every scheme he'd planned, was falling apart. Take him away, Royal nodded to the officers. And make sure he knows. Attempt to contact Emily again, and we'll add witness intimidation to the charges. As they led him to a police car, Matthew looked back at his sister. Susan, tell them you helped me. I did, she replied calmly. I told them everything. That's why I'm out here and not in handcuffs with you. The police car door slammed, and just like that, it was over. 10 years of manipulation, fraud, and betrayal ended in minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Is it safe to come out now? All clear, baby. We did it. She arrived minutes later with Jarrett. As we watched Matthew's jet being searched by federal agents, Emily hugged me tight. They found 3 fake passports and offshore banking documents in the jet, Jarrett reported. He was planning to disappear completely. Royal cleared his throat. The DA wants to meet first thing tomorrow. With the new evidence, Matthew's looking at 20 years minimum, the federal charges alone. What about the company? Susan asked quietly. The board's appointing an interim CEO, Royal replied, and they're very interested in making things right with all the employees. I looked at my daughter, seeing the weight lift from her shoulders. Ready to go home? She nodded, then turned to Susan. Thank you for helping at the end. Susan wiped away tears. I'm so sorry. For everything. As we drove home, Emily finally smiled. Mom, Think we can take a vacation? Somewhere far away from all this? Absolutely, I replied, watching the police cars disappear into the distance with Matthew. But first, we have a court date tomorrow. One last time to watch him face justice. Good, she said firmly. I want to see his face when they read the verdict. So did I. After all, karma was finally catching up to Matthew Elliott, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. The courtroom fell silent as the jury foreman stood. I gripped Emily's hand as we waited for the moment we'd fought so hard to reach. On the count of financial fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Matthew's shoulders slumped. On the count of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. His lawyers shuffled their papers nervously. On the count of attempted exploitation of a minor, Emily squeezed my hand tighter. Guilty. The list continued, each guilty verdict another nail in the coffin of Matthew's empire. When the foreman finished, the judge cleared her throat. Mr. Elliott, please rise. Matthew stood, his designer suit hanging loose on his frame, his arrogance finally shattered. You have been found guilty of serious crimes against not only your company and its employees, but against your own family. Your attempts to manipulate and exploit your stepdaughter show a particular moral bankruptcy that this court finds reprehensible. She paused, looking directly at him. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to the pension fund and affected employees. Your assets will be seized and liquidated to satisfy these obligations. The gavel cracked, and Matthew's legs gave out. As officers led him away, he looked back one last time. Emily, he called out weakly, I'm sorry. Save it, she cut him off, standing tall. I'm not your victim anymore. I'm the one who took you down. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Royal stepped forward, handling the press while Jarrett brought our car around. Mom, Emily said, tugging my sleeve. Look. Susan stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, clutching a thick envelope. Before they take everything, she said, holding it out, I wanted you to have this. It's the deed to the beach house in Maine. I bought it with my own money, before everything. It's yours now. I started to protest, but she shook her head. Please, let me do one right thing. You and Emily deserve a fresh start. Emily took the envelope. Thank you, Aunt Susan. The board meeting went well, Jarrett announced, joining us. They're implementing all new oversight procedures, and he grinned at me. They want you to join the ethics committee, Lana. I laughed. After all this, I think I'm done with corporate life. Actually, Emily said, pulling up something on her phone, I have a better idea. Remember that small tech security firm that helped us trace Matthew's hackers? They're looking for partners. She showed me the proposal she'd drafted. A new company focused on protecting others from the kind of fraud and manipulation we'd experienced, using our story to make a difference. I already ran the numbers, Jarrett added. With my technical experience and your insight into corporate fraud, we could help people, Emily finished. Stop other Matthews before they destroy more families. Royal emerged from the press crowd. Whatever you decide, the civil suits are settled. The company's insurance will cover the pension fund, and the asset liquidation should handle the rest. What about the employees? I asked. Already taken care of. The board approved emergency bonuses to offset any hardship, and they're implementing that whistleblower protection program Emily designed. My daughter blushed. It just made sense. No one should be afraid to speak up. Susan cleared her throat. I should go. My flight to Seattle leaves soon. Fresh start? I asked. She nodded. Teaching high school math, about as far from corporate finance as I can get. As she walked away, Emily pulled out the beach house keys. So, Maine? I looked at my daughter, seeing not the scared girl from that anniversary dinner, but a strong young woman who'd faced down evil and won. Maine, I agreed. But first, I want to hear more about this security firm idea. Already got the perfect name, she grinned. Phoenix Securities, because we help people rise from the ashes. Jarrett raised an eyebrow. I'm in if you are. I hugged Emily close, breathing in the fresh air of freedom. Behind us, the courthouse stood as a symbol of justice served. Ahead, the future stretched bright and clear. Phoenix Securities it is, I decided, but we're still taking that vacation first. Emily laughed. the sound pure and unburdened. "Deal, race you to the car." As I watched her run ahead, I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. Matthew had tried to destroy us, but instead we'd emerged stronger, not as victims, but as survivors, as warriors. And somewhere in a prison cell, Matthew would have plenty of time to think about the women he'd underestimated, the family he'd betrayed, and the justice we'd fought so hard to win. We were finally truly free.